We're here at React Europe. My name is Nader. I'm going to be interviewing a few folks here. And I'm here today with Jared Palmer. Jared, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jared Palmer. I'm the lead engineer of the Palmer Group, a digital strategy design and engineering firm based in New York. And I'm also had the pleasure and honor of being the keynote speaker here at React Europe. It's been really fun. It's been an awesome conference.
I saw the keynote. The keynote was amazing. He went over some of the future. I'm all about futurism. I gave a talk at a conference a couple years ago that wasn't supposed to be about futurism. That was about futurism. I got a little shit about it. But anyway, so what is the future of React? Like, what did you talk about? Like, if you can give us a quick elevator pitch.
So, a bunch of stuff has come out since React Conf 2018. And there's been hooks and suspense and concurrent mode and all these new APIs. And I sort of try to make sense of it for folks and talk about the transition from class components to hooks and how, more or less, the way you can think about that is everything is basically moving from ES6 classes to the render function.
Right.
And there are some awesome benefits of that, right? It looks a lot more like just good old JavaScript that you'd read in a textbook, right? When you just look that first textbook you probably
some of the
read.
Code that you were writing was really interesting. It looked really nice. No more of this. No more referencing like where you are in the scope of a class. And all
right.
That stuff.
So on the one hand, though, you don't have these ES6 classes, which have always been kind of awkward. Like I didn't really use ES6 classes until I started writing React.
Right.
But in contrast, we've sort of swapped those out for a lot more closures in our code. Right, and scoping means a lot more, and so understanding that is now like a sort of a prerequisite to understanding
sense.
React. And so we have a lot more of, everything's in scope with a hook, right? You have your props and everything, your state, your props, all that stuff's going to be in scope more or less from the top down.
Yeah.
And so in classes you had circuitous code, but it also allowed you to organize it in however you kind of wanted to.
Yeah.
With hooks, they need to read top to bottom, and they need to be in the same order every single time, every single render. And so those constraints are interesting, and they're sort of changing the way that we write our applications, but like in a very good way. And so the talk was basically about that, and then also focusing on what's I think most interesting to me is, hooks are cool, and they're a new paradigm from which we can write our applications. But to me, the best use case for them is going to be the marriage of hooks and suspense. And so that was what my talk was about, writing showing people what the future of data fetching is going to look like. And what
you showed on suspense was a lot different than what I saw about a year ago when Dan Abramoff first introduced, I think it was him or someone around then introduced suspense at one of the events. What you had kind of showed was kind of like a combination of suspense and GraphQL and loading state and all this stuff. It was really interesting. So can you talk a little bit about like how that worked? Just out of curiosity?
So basically, suspense is not fully ready for prime time yet. It's already out and published as part of the React, but its use cases are limited at the moment to loading modules with React.lazy. So import, a lazy load module code splitting, and loading assets. And so at ReactConf, I introduced a kind of a joke, but not really a joke, a library called the Platform, which had all of the different types of primitives. It had image and video and all these suspense-ified ready components so that they would they could be used in a suspense application. And what these components do that are slightly different than their like DOM primitives, they will suspend, which means that they will find the nearest suspense ancestor, and they will tell it to suspend rendering down this tree. Until, let's say, this image is fully downloaded, and that's really good if you want to do if you want to pause maybe routing until all your images have loaded to the next route, or if you want to do really great image placeholders. There are various other optimizations there. So those are like the use cases that are in production right now in React. But what I wanted to show was what the future might look like for data fetching.
Right.
And
that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, so basically the React cache is the current implementation for how what the React team has published for how you should be using suspense to cache stuff, but it's kind of, it's very, very primitive. So instead of using React cache, which can only store key values, it's not a great way to cache data because you have issues like normalization, right? So if you've got you've got a list and you want to update that list, and you've got different versions of the same data in different places, updates become really hard to manage. So instead of that, I looked towards the community, and Apollo it's a great normalization and also a cache built in by default. And so that solves for all kinds of issues that are currently in place right now in React Cache. So what I showed off was data fetching with React Suspense and Apollo, and using Apollo's cache as like the data layer, as the data cache, and using React Suspense to take advantage of this new paradigm where you can again suspend React from rendering until all asynchronous operations have completed. And so that's what we were showing off.
So
with hooks,
the
right?
the amazing thing that I like about all of this stuff that's coming out is if you can go ahead and start learning it now and mastering it,
Yeah.
when it comes out, you can start using it, and you'll just be ahead of the curve. And I think being ahead of the curve is a big thing about, you know, when you're trying to do good in your work and you're trying to
Always.
do anything really. You know, you want to stay on top of things. How can people start learning and using this stuff now? And you know, how can they kind of like keep up with what's going to be coming out and when it comes out?
I think it's really hard, and that's what makes kind of it fun, right?
Yeah.
It's like always a challenge. Front end moves so fast. The two things that you can do to really stay on the bleeding edge is, you know, follow the React Core team members on Facebook. On Twitter, not on Facebook, on Twitter. And if you actually subscribe and watch subscribe to notifications or just watch the React repo on GitHub,
Right.
you'll just learn it's a lot of noise. Right, but there's an enormous amount of code.
Yeah, sometimes there'll be like a gem that just like you're just like, oh shit, that's like a game
so
changer.
like exactly.
Yeah.
So like I know in preparation for my ReactConf talk, I was watching the repo for over a month or two, and that is the best way to like really know what's going on. Other than that, just sort of being, you know, going to community events, watching talks. I mean, the same things you normally just do to stay really, really, really far ahead of the curve. But the best thing you can do is just to start reading the source code of React and start contributing to React, and that's how you can really understand it's not an easy task. It's a very, very challenging code base to work on. But that's expected. It's, you know, it's a pretty big thing, right? But that's probably the best way to do it, is to just get your hands dirty there.
Yeah. So okay, cool. So how can people get in contact with you or your company, the Palmer Group?
Yeah, so we're based in New York. I'm at Jared Palmer on Twitter. Palmer.net is our consultancy's website. JaredPalmer.com is my website. I'm pretty much on every single social network. So. And also have a podcast.
And he goes to clubs. I follow him on Instagram. He stays out till like 5 a.m. and then rolls in and like crushes it at work. So
I don't know. You can find me there too. I don't know. Maybe you'll come out. We'll hang. But yeah, so that's where most people can find me.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, thanks for sitting down and talking
Thanks,
with us
man.
today.
It's been fun.
All right.
All right.